I always thought betrayal would feel like a knife in the back. But this was more like a steady, silent leak, one that drained my trust drop by drop until there was nothing left. My name is Richard Harlan. I'm 61 years old, chairman and former CEO of Harlan Moss Industries, a legacy defense tech firm based out of Arlington, Virginia. And until 3 weeks ago, I thought my biggest concern was board politics and quarterly projections. Then I found the invoice. It was a random Tuesday afternoon, rain tapping the window of my home office while I reviewed a stack of expense reports before they hit legal. These days, I mostly signed off on things ceremonially. I had stepped down last year and passed the reins to our new CEO. A move the board thought would modernize our image. And truth be told, I was ready for golf courses and grandkids. But I never stopped watching. The invoice was for a software licensing firm I'd never heard of. Kairos Solutions, LLC. It wasn't the name that caught my attention. It was the payment history. 6 invoices, $27,800 per month, no contracts, no service logs, and all signed off by the new director of systems integration, my son-in-law, Craig Bennett. Craig had married my daughter Emily 4 years ago. He was sharp, MBA educated, came from a good family in Connecticut. A little smug, maybe. But Emily was happy. And in the beginning I truly believed he'd earned his spot at the company. Now I wasn't so sure. I opened our procurement database and ran a query. Kairos Solutions had started billing us exactly 18 months ago. Craig had joined our company 19 months ago. I felt a chill work its way up my spine. Could be a coincidence, I told myself, or maybe a subcontractor buried in a vendor list. But then I looked up the registration for Kairos Solutions. Single member LLC, registered in Delaware. Mailing address, a UPS store in Fairfax. The listed contact, C. Bennett. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't just some mistake. He was stealing from us. From me. From my daughter's inheritance. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake beside my wife, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, thinking of all the meetings Craig had sat in, so confident, so polished, smiling at me across the dinner table, raising a toast at our last family barbecue, all while siphoning money from the company I built from nothing. By morning, my grief had crystallized into purpose. I wasn't going to tell Emily. Not yet. I wasn't going to confront Craig. And I sure as hell wasn't going to the board. This was going to be handled quietly, professionally, strategically. I didn't need drama. I needed evidence. I called Mia Weston, my former executive assistant, now running ops at the firm, trusted, discreet. Mia, I need a favor, I said. Off the record. Eyes only. By noon, I had a copy of every expense report Craig had filed in the last year. By 2 p.m., I had an independent cybersecurity consultant digging into our vendor approval pipeline. And by sunset, I knew exactly how deep the rot went. Kairos Solutions wasn't just fake. It was a shell for a much larger scheme. Craig had built an entire digital laundering loop, false approvals, redirected invoices, falsified IT tickets. Total skim? Over $890,000 across 14 months. And the best part? He'd signed everything himself. Cocky, careless, confident no one would look twice. He was right, until now. I closed the file and poured myself a bourbon. This wasn't just fraud. It was betrayal. But I wasn't angry. I was calculating. The next day, I called in an old contact at the DOJ, not to file anything. Not yet. Just a lunch, a conversation, background noise. Then I met with Mia again. I want Craig's access shadow monitored, every email, every device without alerting him. Understood, she said. And, Mia, I added as she stood. Yes, sir? This stays between us. She nodded once and left the room. 3 nights later, I got the first email dump from Craig's account. Most of it was innocuous. Project updates, calendar invites, a few late-night Slack messages. But one stood out. It was sent at 2:41 a.m. to an address I didn't recognize. The subject line, "We're almost at the threshold. Once I hit 1 million, I'm pulling out." The body, "Just 2 more months, no screw-ups." Attached was a spreadsheet, a ledger, each row marked with an amount, each labeled with HMI-K, Harlan Moss Industries, Kairos, line after line of stolen funds. He wasn't planning on stopping, he was planning an exit. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. Then I picked up my phone and made a call. "George," I said, to our head of corporate legal, "we have a situation. You'll want to come to the house." George Temple arrived at my house just past 9 a.m. the next morning, legal pad in hand, expression unreadable. I'd known George for 25 years, trusted him during merger deals, SEC filings, internal crises. But this was different. This was family. We sat in my study, thick oak door closed behind us. I handed him a folder. Inside, every invoice, every bank transfer, every email Craig had sent to that offshore shell account. George took his time. When he finally looked up, he asked only one question. "Do you want this handled publicly or privately?" I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked to the fireplace, and stared at the photo above the mantel. Emily, age 9, missing front teeth, arms around my neck after her first piano recital. I'd carried that girl through the worst storms of my life, and now her husband was robbing us blind. "Privately," I said. "At least for now." George nodded. "Then we'll need leverage, something bigger than just a spreadsheet." "I already started," I told him. "He's being monitored. Every keystroke, every call George raised an eyebrow." "Surveillance?" "Nothing illegal, just digital breadcrumbs. I want to know what he's planning, where the money's going, and most importantly, who else is in on it." George set down the folder. "What do you want from me?" I looked him square in the eye. "I want a playbook. If we go public, he goes down hard, but if we go private, I want him out, quietly, permanently, without destroying Emily in the process." George tapped his pen against the leather notebook. "Then we need one more thing." "What's that?" "An inside man." 2 days later, we found one. Craig had a junior analyst named Connor, fresh out of Stanford, green as spring, eager to impress. He'd been looped into vendor approvals over the last 3 months, clearly unaware the company he was signing off on didn't actually exist. We brought him in under pretense, a casual compliance audit. Connor was nervous, twitchy, but cooperative. When George showed him the paper trail, his face drained of color. I didn't know," he stammered. "I thought everything was vetted. Craig said the software was mission critical." "You're not the target," George said gently, "but you will be if you don't cooperate." Connor nodded fast. "What do you need?" That night, Craig came home late. Emily was already asleep. I was parked in my car down the block, engine off, watching through binoculars as he climbed the steps to the house I'd helped them buy. He paused at the door, looked over his shoulder once, then went inside. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know how close it was. For the next 2 weeks, Connor fed us everything. Craig had started liquidating assets. Small accounts first, then the bigger ones. He even sold his vintage Corvette through a private buyer in Baltimore, cash only. He was planning to vanish. But what Craig didn't realize, what he couldn't have realized, was that every move he made was being tracked in real time. By me, by George, by Connor, and by the FBI. Yes, them too. Because once we discovered the offshore wires weren't just hiding stolen money, but also crossing federal lines, we had no choice but to escalate. George made the call. Quiet, precise. 2 days later, Agent Clara Patel showed up at my office. Mid-40s, sharp suit, colder eyes. "You've built quite the case, Mr. Harlan," she said, reviewing our dossier. "We've been tracking a network of shell companies tied to federal contractors. This could break the investigation wide open." I nodded. "Glad to help, but I need one thing." "What's that?" "Discretion, until I say otherwise." She smiled. "Of course. We're not here to ruin a family dinner, but we are going to watch." The trap was set. Craig thought he had everything under control: the money, the timeline, the escape route. He had no idea the walls were closing in. And then he made the final mistake. He logged onto our internal system from home, used an unsecured Wi-Fi network, and uploaded a copy of the Kairos ledger to a private cloud drive, labeled Exit Strategy. Mia flagged it within seconds. I forwarded it to Agent Patel. 10 minutes later, I got a call. "This is it," she said. "We have enough to move." I stared at the blinking cursor on my screen. Craig Bennett, my son-in-law, my daughter's husband, was about to be taken down in the quietest, most efficient, most surgically controlled operation of his life, and he still didn't see it coming. It happened on a Thursday. Emily thought we were meeting for lunch. Craig thought he was giving a presentation to a potential investor. Neither of them had any idea that 3 black Suburbans were parked less than a block away, that half the conference room he was walking into had hidden audio equipment, or that the investor he was pitching to was actually FBI Special Agent Donovan. I sat 2 floors above in the executive suite, sipping black coffee as I watched the live feed on Mia's secured monitor. Craig walked in. Charcoal blazer, perfect smile, carrying a laptop like it held the future. He had no idea it held his past. Donovan played his role well, asked a few softball questions, nodded at the right moments, then slowly turned the conversation toward Craig's offshore activities. Craig blinked, hesitated. "Sorry, what does that have to do with Kairos Systems?" he asked, voice a shade too casual. Donovan smiled politely. "Everything." That's when the door opened. 2 more agents stepped in. Craig stood slowly, mouth tight, hands half raised in disbelief. This some kind of joke? No one laughed. He wasn't arrested. Not yet. That had been my condition. I didn't want a scene, didn't want headlines, didn't want Emily humiliated in the national press. So they escorted Craig out, quietly, with a sealed envelope in hand. Inside, a summary of the charges, a notice of asset freeze, and a deadline. "You have 7 days to come clean. Tell your wife, tell your lawyer, tell the truth, or we do it for you." That night, Emily called me in tears. "Dad, something's wrong. Craig says he needs to talk but won't tell me what it's about." I could hear the fear in her voice, but also the fracture forming beneath it. She was starting to question him, starting to suspect. And Craig, well, he didn't last 7 days. He lasted 2. Saturday morning, 6:42 a.m., I got the call. "George. He's trying to run." I was already dressed before he finished the sentence. Craig had wired $60,000 to an unknown account at 4:13 a.m., booked a one-way flight to Costa Rica, and called his college roommate, now a corporate attorney in Panama. We didn't stop him. We didn't have to. At 10:15 a.m., just as he stepped into the security line at JFK Airport, TSA flagged his passport. There was a hold on his travel privileges. Not arrest, just a quiet detainment request, courtesy of the DOJ. Craig was escorted to a private screening room. There, Agent Patel met him with a file 2 inches thick. His face, I'm told, went pale by page 5. By page 11, he'd stopped speaking. By page 21, he asked for a lawyer. Emily didn't answer my calls for 2 days. When she finally did, it wasn't to talk, it was to yell. "You knew!" she screamed. "You knew and you didn't tell me!" "I was trying to protect you," I said quietly. "From what? Humiliation? My husband? Myself?" I didn't have an answer. She hung up. That night I sat in the dark, not because I was afraid or angry or even sad, but because the victory felt empty. I had crushed a man who tried to rob me, unraveled a fraud that could have destroyed my legacy. But in doing so, I'd cracked something inside my daughter, something fragile, something sacred, and I didn't know how to fix it. 3 weeks passed. Craig's attorney negotiated a plea deal: wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, no prison, yet. Just asset forfeiture, corporate expulsion, and lifetime federal monitoring. He agreed to cooperate fully, named 2 other executives involved in similar shell schemes, gave up offshore accounts, handed over passwords. He flipped like a scared teenager caught cheating on a final exam. But not once did he apologize. Not to me, not to Emily, not to anyone. The final blow came during the divorce mediation. Craig arrived with 2 attorneys and 0 shame. Emily sat across from him, spine straight, jaw clenched. Her eyes never left him as George read the settlement terms: full asset recovery to Emily, immediate annulment of marital financial claims, no contact order, 0 compensation. Craig didn't fight, didn't even speak, just signed and left. 2 months later, I got a letter. No return address, typed, no salutation, just a single line: "You were right. I should have seen it sooner. But thank you for not letting it destroy me." I read it twice, then once more, then folded it neatly and tucked it in my wallet, right behind a photo of Emily, age 9, arms around my neck after her piano recital. 6 months. That's how long it took before Emily returned to the house for Sunday dinner. She didn't say much, didn't smile when I greeted her at the door, just walked in quietly, placed a bottle of red on the counter, and asked, "Do you still make that garlic rosemary roast? Or was that just Mom's thing?" I blinked, then nodded. "I make it better," I said. She didn't laugh, but her lips twitched. That was enough. We sat at the old table, the one she used to do homework on, the one Craig said was too dated for their new home. She picked at her salad, asked about the dog, avoided eye contact. Then halfway through the roast, she finally looked up. "Did you know about the fake invoices?" I met her eyes. "Yes." "For how long?" "Long enough to catch everything." She set her fork down. "I feel stupid." I shook my head. "Don't." I defended him. For years. I believed everything he said. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you loving. There's a difference. She didn't speak for a while. Then, I almost deleted the footage. "What footage?" She looked up. "From the nanny cam in the guest room. The one I forgot to uninstall when we moved. It picked up Craig on the phone with someone, talking about offshore gaps and tax diversions. I didn't know what it meant at the time. I leaned back in my chair, breath caught halfway between relief and rage. "Did you keep it?" She nodded. "It's on my laptop. I gave a copy to the FBI." I nodded. "Smart." A beat of silence passed. Then Emily whispered, "Did I marry a monster?" "No," I said. "You married a man who became one." Over the next few months, Emily rebuilt. She moved back into the city, took on a full-time role at the community legal aid office, said she wanted to help people who fall for the wrong person with a good smile. She got a dog, small, loud, ridiculous, named it Maximus. We'd meet for coffee some Sundays, talk about anything but Craig, until one morning, at a sidewalk cafe in Midtown, she pulled out a thin envelope. "I'm changing my name back," she said. I looked at the paperwork. Emily Brooks, her mother's maiden name. "I want a clean break," she added. "Not just from him, from that version of me." I signed the witness line without hesitation. "Welcome back," I said. Craig, meanwhile, had faded into obscurity. His LinkedIn disappeared. His startup was dissolved. His co-conspirators faced sentencing. One got 18 months. The other fled to the Cayman Islands but was picked up on a red notice 3 weeks later. Craig remained in New York, under tight probation. He took a job doing financial audits for a small firm in Yonkers. Last I heard, he was living in a rented basement apartment. No wife, no friends, no empire. One day I received a certified letter. Craig's signature in the corner. Inside, a personal note. No threats, no denials, just a single line typed on plain paper. You won. I didn't respond, because this was never about winning. It was about protecting what mattered and building something Craig could never touch again. Emily and I took a trip that fall. Montana. The air was crisp, the mountains quiet. We didn't talk about the past, just hiked, drank coffee, laughed at Maximus chasing chipmunks. On our last night, sitting by the fire, Emily looked up at the stars and said, "You were my safety net." I smiled. "No," I said. "I was just your dad. You saved yourself." She didn't argue, just leaned her head on my shoulder, and in that silence, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. The story didn't make national news. It didn't trend on Twitter. There were no viral hashtags or exposés. But in our neighborhood, it echoed like a siren. Neighbors who used to smile at Craig began crossing the street. Investors who once shook his hand now whispered behind closed doors. And friends who defended him at barbecues quietly deleted his contact info. Justice didn't arrive with fanfare. It crept in like morning light, gradually, unmistakably, and impossible to ignore. And yet, we never gloated. Not Emily, not me. We didn't need to. Because winning wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space, reclaiming peace. One morning, while organizing the attic, I found a box labeled 2003, Emily's first apartment. Inside were old photographs, crumpled rental agreements, a faded post-it note that read, "Remember who you were before the world told you who to be." It stopped me cold. Because that's what Craig had tried to do, reshape her, mold her, isolate her, but she had remembered, eventually, and that made all the difference. A year after everything unraveled, Emily started a podcast. Red Flags and Paper Trails. It was raw, honest, occasionally hilarious. She never used real names, never painted herself as a victim. Instead, she used her story to help others recognize what she'd missed. The slow drip of gaslighting, the financial control masked as love, the charisma that hides corrosion. Within 3 months, she had over 100,000 subscribers. Within 6, she'd signed a book deal. "I'm not trying to be famous," she told me. "I'm just trying to make sure the next Craig doesn't get away with it." As for me, I retired early, started teaching woodworking at a community center. Most days, I come home with sawdust in my beard and sore hands that feel good in a way typing never did. I still check the mailbox every day, not because I expect anything, but because it reminds me I'm still here, still part of the world, still standing. One evening, Emily and I were sitting on the porch, Maximus curled up at our feet, when she turned to me and said, "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't opened that email?" "All the time." She nodded. "It scares me. How close I came to losing everything." I reached over, squeezed her hand. "But you didn't," I said. "You came back stronger." Her eyes shimmered. "Because of you." "No," I said, smiling. "Because you remembered who you were." A few weeks ago, a woman from Phoenix reached out to Emily, said she'd heard her podcast, that her husband had been doing weird things with their joint accounts, that he always had a reason, a justification, that she'd almost believed him until she heard Emily's voice in her headphones describing the same red flags. That woman left, filed for divorce, opened her own account, got a job. "Just wanted to say thank you," she wrote. "You saved me from becoming a footnote in someone else's scheme." We printed that message, framed it, hung it on the wall between a photo of my wife and one of Emily at age 7, covered in chocolate frosting. A reminder that words matter, that stories protect, and that quiet, stubborn love might just be the loudest form of resistance. So, now I ask you, have you ever seen someone like Craig? The kind of person who smiles while they steal? Have you ever ignored a red flag until it was too late? What would you have done in Emily's shoes? Or mine? Let us know in the comments. Someone out there might need your story more than you think.